G'day. A small bowl of rice. Relax, be very still and listen. Listen carefully to this tale about a miser who lived in a big mansion at the top of a lonely hill. One day, something happened that was to change his life forever. Do you want to know what that was? Let's see if we can find out. Now, the miser's mansion was very old, big and drafty. He lived there alone, apart from a few servants, and a dog whom he hadn't even bothered to name. The miser slept and ate in one of the mansion's many towers and spent his days counting and recounting his gold. He never loved gold more than anything in the world. He loved gold more than anything in the world. He never shared or even spent it, and he was renowned for being the meanest man there ever was. He was so mean that he had never invited anyone to his house, nor ever given anyone a present. In fact, he only went out once a year for fear of spending money. And on this day he would travel in a grand carriage with his dog and the servant to collect taxes from the poor peasants who farmed his land. One year he was returning home after a very successful day collecting taxes. Night was falling, and as he hugged his large sack of gold, his carriage was suddenly stopped by robbers. "Help!" he shouted, but it was no use. The robbers stripped the miser of his clothes, made him put on rags, and took him and his dog far out into the countryside, where they left them with no food or water. The miser was very shaken up by this turn of events, and shouted at the little dog, whom he had never bothered to give a name, for not attacking the robbers. It was getting dark, and they were completely lost. Despairing, he crawled under a hedge and cried himself to sleep, thinking of his stolen gold. The little dog curled up on a ball nearby. The next day he woke up feeling cold, sore and hungry. He set off with the dog in search of a village, walking and walking, until eventually they came to a road, although they still saw no one. After walking all day without food, the miser felt desperately hungry and sorry for himself. Then, all of a sudden, his dog barked and ran off. The miser followed him, only to find a lone little cottage surrounded by wild rose bushes. He saw white smoke rising from its chimney. Encouraged, he knocked on the door. But suddenly he hesitated, remembering with shame how he had always sent away anyone who knocked on his own door for help. Why would anyone want to help a man dressed in rags such as himself? He was just about to leave when a cheerful voice called, "Who's there?" Relieved, the miser replied humbly, "I'm sorry to disturb you, but I'm lost and hungry. Could you please spare my dog and I some food? And would there be any chance of letting us sleep somewhere warm?" asked the miser. "Of course," replied the friendly voice. "Come in." So the miser went in, and the dog followed. The room was quite bare. There were only a few pieces of old furniture and no curtains on the windows. But there was a small fire in the hearth. Sitting at a table was a kind-looking man, and by his side a brown dog wagged his tail and grinned. The man got up from the table and laughed heartily. "It's a poor lost soul, Archie," he told his dog, "and he's brought you a new friend." "Come and sit down," he said, turning to the miser. "Welcome to my feast. Tonight we have a banquet of delicious rice," he joked. The man went to a shelf and took down 2 small bowls. "We'll have to share this rice. It's all I have, I'm afraid," he added, "and your dog can share Archie's." Saying this, he put some rice in Archie's large bowl for the 2 dogs, and then divided the rest between the two small bowls for himself and the miser. Who could believe this man's generosity? How could he be so poor yet so happy? The miser thought of his gold, his servants, and his mansion. But despite all these possessions, he had never been as happy as this man who had so little. He was filled with guilt and shame for his miserly behaviour over the years. Soon his hunger brought him back to the present, and he tucked into the rice. He ate greedily, thinking how nothing had ever tasted so delicious. Soon the miser was infected by the warmth of the kind man's heart, and found himself confiding in him about how he had been robbed. The man listened intently, and when the miser had finished, he said, "Your story makes me sad. You have so much, yet your life is so lonely and empty." Then he gave the miser his sleeping spot in front of the fire, said good night, and lay down on the floor to get a good night's sleep. The miser was so moved by this kindness, and so grateful for it, as he lay awake in front of the fire thinking about what had happened. His mean heart began to melt. Tears streamed down his cheeks, for he now saw how terrible his life really was. He reached out to his dog and patted him for the first time ever, and he resolved to repay the man's generosity 1,000-fold. The next morning, when he awoke, he invited the poor man and his dog to come live with him in his mansion, an offer which they gladly accepted. Without delay, they all set off for the miser's home. And so it was from that day forward, the miser changed his ways. He and the poor man became the best of friends, living happily together with Archie and Merry, as he named his dog, who flourished with the newfound attention. No one was ever again turned away empty-handed from the mansion on the hill, and instead of collecting taxes, the miser used his gold to improve the lives of local people. Twice a year, he even held feasts for his neighbours and parties for the children, which were so enjoyable they became the talk of the land. Greed and selfishness spoil things for everyone. A wise person realises that the way to true happiness is through sharing whatever they have, no matter how little that may be. Thank you for listening. I love you, LouLou.